Hello and welcome to episode 2 on What If the United States Randomly Exploded Overnight. As you could see, for the people who watched the first episode, we have a new map here, showing not just the continuous United States, but all of North America, including Canada and Mexico and all the other countries. This is because the map that I used before kind of sucked at showing all the changes that were happening because, with all the states joining Canada and stuff like that, it wasn't shown. So this map definitely shows it a lot better, and also everything is colored, so makes more sense now. So going off of where we left off episode, I said that there was a referendum going on in the country of Superior, on which the northern regions of Minnesota and Wisconsin were to join the state. However, now this referendum was allowed to be happened, and referendums are held in all of these counties in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and these are the results from each county. All right, so all of these counties in green decided to join the new country of Superior, while all the counties in red decided to stay with their home country. So the new border of Superior is proclaimed, and we can move on to the next part, which is happening in the Dakotan Federation. Now, in the last episode, we touched on the independence of the Navajo Nation. However, there are a lot of indigenous groups that also live in what is now the Dakotan Federation, namely the Lakota Sioux tribes, which mainly take place in western South Dakota. Seeing the successful independence of the Navajo tribe nation, the Lakota Sioux asked the Dakotan Federation for their own independence with these lands right over here. However, this is rejected by the Dakotan Federation. Afterwards, a new proposal is made by the Lakota Sioux to the Dakotan Federation with reduced land and instead asking for increased autonomy. Unlike the first proposal, this is actually accepted, and the autonomy of the Lakota Sioux within the Dakotan Federation is proclaimed, which means that the Lakota Sioux is still a part of the Dakotan Federation. However, they will make their own laws and stuff like that, pretty much acting separately from the rest of the Dakotan Federation. Moving on over to the west coast of the United States, we have a growing movement for a united Cascadian state between Washington and Oregon. However, as some of you might have known, some counties in eastern Oregon would want to break away to join Idaho. Now, in the talks of the Cascadian Union uniting, they also invite in Idaho to discuss the future of these eastern Oregon counties. And just like in Superior, they decide to have a plebiscite on the regions to see who wants to join Idaho and who wants to join the new Cascadian Union, because Washington and Oregon decide to finally unite. But before they could do that, they need to have the plebiscite on the eastern Oregon counties, because if they don't, unrest would grow in that region. So, in all of these Oregon counties, plebiscites are held in referendums deciding the future of all of these counties on whether they want to join Idaho or join the Cascadian Federation. And as a result, all of the counties in green wanted to join Idaho, while all the counties in red wanted to join the Cascadian Federation. However, after meeting, they both decided to exchange some land, as this would create an incredibly bad border war. So, after the land swaps, this is the new border between the new Cascadian Federation and Idaho. Alright, so after some border swaps, the new border of the Cascadian Federation and Idaho is proclaimed, and also I just found that I missed a spot here. No worries. So now we have a new Cascadian state and an extended Idaho. Moving on over to the East Coast and the admission of Missouri into the Southern Confederacy, or the Southeastern Union, or whatever it's called. This was definitely a long time coming, as Missouri is pretty similar to the rest of the member states, and also because Missouri isn't really also an exactly rich state. So basically, for the greater good, they joined the new federation. Now, in the last episode, I said that California had a sphere of influence in different regions. Let me go ahead and show you those spheres of influence right now. So here they are, the Californian and Texan sphere of influence. And the more eagle eyed viewers might have noticed that the Navajo Nation didn't join either of the two spheres of influence. This was because the Navajo Nation didn't really want to associate with any other state, they just wanted to be kept neutral. But since the Navajo Nation is more in a desert, they're kind of screwed pretty much as being independent on their own. So they decide, again, for the greater good, to join a sphere of influence and get some economic opportunities. And they decide to go with the Californian sphere of influence because they are much closer to California than Texas. They have some ties with Arizona, who's already in the Californian sphere of influence, and they're just closer to California than Texas. It's much easier to get to there. So, with all those in mind, the Navajo Nation will join the Californian sphere of influence and economic union. Now, if you're wondering, are there going to be any, like economic federations, or are they just in, just in a sphere of influence? In the future, yeah, there can be an economic alliance going on. That is definitely on the table, but for right now, it's just spheres of influence. Speaking of Texas, the Southeastern Federation would like to give Texas an offer to get some money because keep in mind, even though these states are unitary, they're still pretty poor. The proposal to Texas will be that the 3 counties located in the I keep on saying counties, but now they act more as states. Some territorial changes probably would have happened after the states gained their independence with the counties because a lot of counties are very underpopulated, so they'd probably be incorporated into each other, or some states might adopt a new system to make basically like federalize all the counties and make them act more like provinces or states. But for simplicity purposes, we'll just have the original counties marked as the states in these countries. So, a offer is made to Texas that they will sell the Oklahoma Panhandle for about $20 million. Texas accepts the offer, and a new deal is made, and the Oklahoma Panhandle is annexed to Texas. So now, with this purchase, the Oklahoma Panhandle is no more, and there can be some more funds for the Southeastern Federation. Moving on over to the East Coast, there was something that I was wrong about in the sense that North and South Carolina aren't really that much richer than the Dakotan Federation. I did say that the Carolinas were much richer. However, South Carolina is actually one of the poorest states in the United States. So, actually, a union between them and North Carolina wouldn't actually be that far off. It's still kind of unlikely, but it's not that far off. In this scenario, I will have them unite together. However, they will still be within the Floridian sphere of influence. Also, I will get rid of all the sphere of influence stuff going on over here to make things a bit easier on the eyes for you guys. Moving on over to the East Coast, we have some border exchanges going on between Ohio, Virginia, and Maryland because, as you could see, the borders between the three states are pretty awkward. So, this is what is agreed upon between the three states at their meeting. Okay, so all the border exchanges going on between the three states are as follows. Maryland was to give up its westernmost regions to Ohio, And the westernmost part, or the easternmost part of West Virginia, was to be given to Virginia. This is because these three counties in West Virginia that forms the little part that juts out of West Virginia were very following West Virginia's secession from Virginia were very pro-secession and more aligned to Virginia than West Virginia. Even today, there are some people from those counties that want to rejoin Virginia. So it only made sense for them to rejoin with Virginia. In exchange, Virginia was to give up its eastern Chesapeake Shore area to Maryland. However, Virginia was pretty hesitant to give up this claim, and they only agreed to give it up to Maryland after a very hefty fine or a very hefty purchase. So the new borders between the three states are proclaimed, and the borders look much, much nicer. Moving on over to the Caribbean, more specifically Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Keep in mind that when the United States imploded overnight, all the territories as well gained their independence. However, a lot of the islands and territories and stuff aren't really fit for governing on their own. You could argue that there's countries like, St. Kitts and Nevis, Barbados, all those countries and stuff like that, you know, function on their own. However, a lot of territories that the United States have are very, uninhabited islands and stuff like that. So a lot of them would probably just join Hawaii, or in the case of American Samoa, they'd probably just join back up with Samoa. In the case of the US Virgin Islands, the option is clear. Just join Puerto Rico. So that's exactly what they do. They join Puerto Rico. And other territories, like for instance Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, doesn't really have it doesn't really have any reason to exist anymore. So Cuba just annexes the region, they destroy the base, and it is now an integral part of Cuba. Now, of course, worldwide there is a lot of turmoil going on. This is something that I didn't touch up last episode for some reason, is that without the United States, countries like Russia and China can expand their sphere of influence, mainly in Africa and in Latin America, which is a big thing. Latin America already, even with the United States, countries like Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba have already had Chinese and Russian influence in them. And I guarantee you, without the United States, that influence is only going to grow to countries, like Haiti, and maybe even countries like Guatemala, or other countries, Suriname, maybe. But it's not going to be a big thing for now. Don't expect Russia and China to take care of all of Latin America, but I do expect a few countries to come under their influence if the United States collapsed. I do know that some states like California and Texas would probably take the torch in diplomacy, probably taking over the United States in the UN. But California and Texas are nowhere near the strength that a united United States is. So they'll probably be middle powers. California would probably be an above average power, probably suitable to, like, I would say Italy in a way, but they wouldn't be nearly as powerful as a fully united United States. Moving on over to Nevada and an uprising in the Las Vegas area. Now, for context, in Nevada, Las Vegas wasn't really given much representation because much of the government resides in Carson City and Reno. So the most of the representation was taking place in the western part of Nevada, and Las Vegas was sort of just left alone. Now, I know that this is pretty much unlikely to happen in this scenario. Las Vegas probably would be given all the power, but even still, there would be an uprising in Carson City and Reno, so Nevada would probably be split anyway. Since Las Vegas has most of the power within Nevada, I'd say population, not power. Since Las Vegas has most of the population, the rest of Nevada is kind of screwed here. So this uprising quickly spreads and conquers most of the other land. They reach the Hoover Dam and take it. And after about a year of this happening, Las Vegas and Nevada come to an agreement. So, as per the agreement, all territories that are a part of the Las Vegas County would be formed into their own country. Now, after this, Nevada would be pretty crippled afterwards. However, I'd still think they would hold on, mainly because of their eastern cities. Reno is still there, and also because of their not Canadian, because of their Californian influence. They'd probably still hold on for a little while, but not as long as they would if they still had Las Vegas. Now, if you're wondering, yes, Las Vegas would still be under the Californian sphere of influence. However, they would basically act on their own like any other independent country. Moving on over to the central United States, we have a new union forming. The union between Nebraska and Kansas. Now, these two countries or states were doing pretty good on their own for a while. However, after about a few years, not really a few years, it's been a few decades at this point. After a few decades, their economy had been stagnating, mainly due to the fact that these states are more or less focused on agriculture in their economy. And basically, they decided to unite together as they felt that if they were still on their own, they couldn't really survive much longer. So they decided to unite with each other, just to keep them alive, just like the Southern Federation. Moving on over, we have sort of an interesting thing happening. We have New Mexico joining up with Texas. So the reason for this joining is because just like Nebraska and Kansas, they were doing pretty okay for the most part. New Mexico is one of the poorest states in the United States. However, they felt that they could hold their own for a while. Of course, the independence of the Navajo Nation did hurt them a little bit, but the area that they lost was pretty underpopulated, I think, so they didn't suffer that much. But now, seeing as they've been independent for a while now, and they haven't, like Nebraska and Kansas, they haven't really figured out a way to keep themselves going much longer. So they decide to join Texas because it was pretty much really the only thing that they could really do at this point. So that is pretty much it for the second part of What If the United States Exploded Overnight. To recap, we have the land gains made by Superior. We have the autonomy of the Lakota Sioux. We have the creation of the Cascadian state as well as the annexing of eastern counties of Oregon to Idaho. We have the independence of Las Vegas. We have the Navajo Nation joining the Californian sphere of influence. We have Nebraska and Kansas uniting together. We have some land swaps made by Ohio, Virginia, and Maryland. We have the Carolinas uniting, as well as Russian and Chinese influence in Latin America increasing, as well as New Mexico joining Texas. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this second part of the series. I'm planning on making this into a full series, so if you want a part 3, I'll just let me know. I'll probably just make it anyway. So, you know, because I like this series. It's a good thing to do. I will promise you that in later parts there will be some more, turmoil going on with wars and stuff. Some wars are coming, but like I said in the last episode, for right now, wars aren't really a thing. The states just want to survive, and so they're going for the diplomatic route and uniting together. So I'll see you in part 3. Hope you enjoyed, and goodbye.